Technology can make life safer, smoother and more predictable. We all know that, and we know it's a good thing, especially in areas like healthcare, crime reduction, in fact anything that keeps us safe, healthy and safeguards our well-being. But humanity is defined by stories, and stories depend on uncertainty and conflict, also things going wrong. Meanwhile, modern technology's goal is to remove those ingredients. And I think it's interesting how that adjusts the stories of our lives. So I've been thinking, does this tell us something about the lives that we're building for ourselves? And is ironing out all of the creases from life always a good thing? This is Layered Future, an exploration of tech's impact on the human experience. And this video is about how technology may be removing some important plot lines from our lives. Look, I think this subject is relevant to everyone, including you. So enough of the intro, let's dive in. A lot of TV shows and films are set either in the past or in fantastical imagined futures or realities. The contemporary world, the modern world, is quite difficult to write for convincingly when you think about it. As an example, if you want to write a story about some sort of crime in the late 2020s, then what you've got to think about is how people have always got phones on them, they're always being caught on CCTV, their cars, the number plates are being recognised by ANPR. They're probably going to get caught by their enormous digital trail that they leave. On top of that, a delay in arriving to meet someone is now solved with a simple text message. Most people can get in contact with anyone all of the time. We've constantly got mobile phones on us, and we've almost always got some form of coverage, whether that's Wi-Fi or mobile networks. GPS has made getting lost surprisingly difficult. We've all got mini sat-navs in our pockets all of the time. So for fiction set in the present, writers of fiction have to actually invent reasons why the technological structures around us don't work. The phone's dead, there's no signal, the camera's failed. Or they can choose to set their stories before any of this type of technology was invented. Historical settings restore those levels of uncertainty that often made stories engaging and things we wanted to sit down and read or watch. In historical dramas, distance matters again, and being alone actually means being alone. Information takes time to travel, and people can disappear without leaving an obvious and trackable digital trace. Or of course, writers can set stories in fantastical worlds and imagined futures, and then that gives them the same freedom. They can make up the rules. But the reason I'm saying all this is because I wonder whether the difficulty that fiction writers have in setting stories in the present also tells us something a bit deeper about the modern world we live in. Because when writers struggle to write compelling stories set in the present, well, maybe we are also struggling in some ways to live compelling lives. When you boil things down, technology's job, in one sense, is to stop stories from happening, stop things from unfolding. Only stories in which things go wrong, but they are stories nonetheless. Now you may be sitting there thinking, well, taking away bad stories from my life is a good thing, and I would agree with you about that. But what I would also say is it's hard to argue that technology isn't removing, alongside that, some of the spice from our lives. Because not all of the things that go wrong impact us badly. Not all the things that don't go the way we plan are negative. As humans, our attention is always grabbed by problems, issues related to health, relationships, money, danger, and survival. These things really matter to us for a good reason. From an evolutionary perspective, it all makes perfect sense. Problems once demanded that we notice, discuss, and respond to them ourselves. But increasingly, that work is now outsourced to technology. A discrete layer now sits between us and many of what would be everyday problems. GPS prevents the wrong turn before we can make it, and cars warn us before something breaks. Connected thermostats adjust and monitor the temperatures in our homes, and calendars remember things so we don't have to. Importantly, algorithms are increasingly mitigating issues before any problems emerge. The perfect technological outcome from an optimization perspective is that nothing happens at all. And like I said earlier, when it comes to crime, accidents, and illness, nothing happening is exactly what we want. But the process of optimization doesn't stop at removing serious issues like that. It seeks to remove every single bump in the road. Some difficulties diminish life, clearly, but others actually add to it. Perhaps you think that that is nonsense, but trust me, honestly, they do. Getting slightly lost rarely ends in disaster. In fact, it can become a bit of an adventure, and struggling up a hill on a bicycle can actually be the point of going out cycling. You don't always need an e-bike. You don't need something with a battery to help you in that struggle. Waiting can create anticipation, and having to work something out can actually create satisfaction in our minds. Having to ask somebody for help in the street or at work or school can actually create an unexpected interaction that you wouldn't have had if technology had solved the issue before it happened. And these tiny inconveniences often become the stories we remember and tell each other. We got lost is the basis of millions of good anecdotes over centuries, over millennia. And then the irony is that as we remove difficulty from our everyday lives, we then also feel the need to recreate it for our entertainment. We like to hike, climb, camp, play games, and actually choose to solve puzzles voluntarily. I mean, a game without obstacles isn't much of a game, and a hike without any effort at all isn't really a hike. So we seem to want resistance at the very same time that we're also trying to design it out of everyday life. And interestingly, I think that while the physical world is clearly becoming safer, our roads, our towns, our cities are inherently safer than they once were, drama seems to be migrating into the digital space. Modern problems increasingly happen through screens and our systems and all the information that's shifting back and forth. So we've made life physically safer, but our minds are actually more anxious in some ways about the invisible dangers of the digital world. Many people, especially the elderly, live in fear of being scammed online, and for good reason. The physical threat of being burgled can be combated with better home security, simple solutions that everyone understands. But the digital threat of online theft emerges from an abstract landscape that few people truly understand. So even though technology tends to solve one set of problems, it usually also creates new ones. And so our issues seem to be migrating further away from the physical world and deeper into the digital landscape with every passing year. Look, I'm not for a moment suggesting that we should abandon tech that makes life safer. Nobody should turn their backs on technology that can assist with health monitoring, security, and any of the emergencies that we see in everyday life. The issue is knowing where optimization should stop and understanding that not every difficulty is actually a problem that needs to be removed. Like I said, often the presence of hills is the reason you get on a bike, and turning the light on yourself is usually better for your body and mind than a smart home doing it for you. Getting a bit lost can genuinely be better than following the blue line on Google Maps. Until recently, my partner and I used a GPS hiking app called Komoot, which is fantastic, and I do recommend it, but we both felt that walking had become a bit predictable. We never saw things that we weren't expecting. So we bought a book with some maps and directions, and we've kind of switched over to using that, and honestly it is much better. We got a bit lost the other week and we ended up having to walk further, which was good because it's more exercise, plus we saw a really cool medieval church that we wouldn't have seen if we'd have been following Komoot's really accurate maps. As a civilization, we're now aware that technology can remove most of the friction that previous generations had to put up with. But I think we need to ask ourselves, has technology also removed some of the really good aspects of life as well? And maybe fiction gives us a useful way of recognizing that, seeing how making a really compelling story in 2026 is a bit more difficult than it would have been 20 years ago, must tell us something about how technology is supporting us across the board. So if removing every problem makes a fictional story a bit boring, then maybe the same is true of real life. So if you take away just one thing from this video, I'd like it to be this. Before optimizing something away, ask yourself whether it was actually harming you in the first place, because sometimes you'll realize that it's not. I hope this video has given you something to think about. That's always my goal. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.